Welcome to Ask Sean, where I explore all sorts of questions about life, relationships, and being human. I'm Sean Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question for me, you can submit that anonymously at asksean.org. So in this video, I want to talk about the ways that we as a culture tend to imagine that other people can make us feel certain ways. So we will say things like, I want someone to make me feel safe. I want someone to make me feel respected, to make me feel like a man, to make me feel like a woman, to make me feel handsome, to make me feel beautiful, to make me feel smart, to make me feel worthy, to make me feel like I matter. So we have all sorts of different ways of different expressions of this, right? And it's complicated because there is a bit of truth in these statements, in terms of we are speaking to a real thing that is good to want. And there's also a bit of fantasy in these statements. And so I want to parse this out. I want to parse out the ways in which no one actually can make me feel safe or make you feel safe. No one can make us feel worthy or make us feel loved. Now, this can feel a little provocative, a little controversial maybe here at the outset, but stick with me, bear with me here as we kind of tease out what I'm meaning. So a lot of times when we say, so I think I'm going to use the safety one a fair bit, maybe because it's very common. I don't know. It feels an interesting example to use. I'll probably sprinkle in other, some of these other variations, but it's all the same thing, right? So we'll say, I want someone to make me feel safe. I hear this in the context of, like the dating world, right? When clients are talking about, pursuing dating, or friends, are speaking of this. Women especially will say, I want someone who makes me feel safe. But men will say this too, or at least think it. Maybe they don't express it quite as much. Men maybe might express, I don't know if it depends on the man if he would be as direct to say, I want someone to make me. A man might say, I want someone to make me feel respected, or to respect me, kind of thing, which is a variation on the same thing. So we'll say, I want someone who makes me feel safe, or I want people in my life who make me feel safe. Or the contrary, right, is we might say to someone, you're making me feel unsafe right now. So part of what we mean by these statements, whether about safety or any number of other things, is we're trying to express that there are actions and behaviors and ways of being that feel better to us or feel worse to us, and that have an effect on us, that bring up things in us. So, for example, if somebody starts raising their voice, we might say, this is the kind of context where we might say, you're starting to make me feel unsafe. What we mean there partly, which is a totally legit thing to have a conversation about, is I really don't like how loud you're getting. It doesn't feel good to me. I don't like the feel of that relationally. I would really like for you to lower your voice and to bring down your intensity if you can. But we don't actually make that conscious typically. Like we sort of embed that, right? Like we embed that in this just blanket statement of, well, you're making me feel unsafe, or you're making me feel not respected, or you're making me feel, like say somebody's late, for a get together, you make me feel unimportant. And that is something we need to be able to have a conversation about, right? We need to be able to say more directly, hey, when you show up an hour late for, our hanging out, it brings up questions in me of like, do I matter to you? Especially if it's a repeated thing, right? It's like, this has happened 3 times in a row. Like, is our time important to you? Because it's important to me. And if it's not that important to you, like I need to know that so that I can make different decisions. And I'm going to let you know that that's disappointing and I feel hurt by that. That's, I thought we were in similar places in terms of what we want out of this friendship or whatever the relational context is. Or this, I don't feel respected. I feel like you're not respecting my time. So, but getting into the nuance there, right? When you don't show up, when you're late, it makes me wonder, is there a mismatch here between how we're treating this, sort of the value we're placing on the time together, on the importance of, whether it's hanging out or a task, if it's a project or something, that kind of thing. But here's the thing. So I'm already kind of illustrating one of the points I wanted to get to, which is that we don't ever get that specific typically. We just say, well, you made me feel bad, in whatever way. You made me feel, X, Y, Z. And that's where the falsehood comes in. That's where the fantasy comes in, because people can't actually make us feel things. People can have behaviors, actions, ways of being that can bring up feelings in us, right? We do influence each other. And there can be conversations we need to have about each other's behavior and what we would prefer and what we're not okay with, where our boundaries are. But our feelings actually are our own responsibility. Now, this is particularly kind of challenging around thinking about something like safety, right? To say no one can actually make me feel safe, that my felt sense of safety is actually primarily dependent on me. Like that feels, that feels like, picking a fight with the internet kind of thing, right? Like what does that mean? Like, are we saying, perpetrators or abusers, like, don't have responsibility or like there's all kinds of questions that can come up there, right? So let me be very clear. We are all responsible for our own behavior. So if somebody is behaving badly, they are responsible for that behavior. So this is like, we're not letting anybody off the hook for their behavior, how they treat other human beings, how they treat us, right? People are still responsible for their behavior. And we each are responsible for our own emotions. We're influenced by each other, absolutely. But like my felt sense of safety, my felt sense of being valued, of being loved, that is ultimately my responsibility. It interacts with the world around me, right? Like it interacts with my fellow human beings and how I experience them and whatnot. But it is ultimately something for me to work on. So let me give an example that illustrates this. Two human beings could each experience the same difficult, potentially scary event. So let's say like somebody trying to rob them at knife point. That's a horrible thing, right? Like that is absolutely not okay. We should not treat each other those ways, right? We should not threaten each other with knives or with anything else. We should not try to take what is not ours. We should not steal. So in this, kind of hypothetical example, one individual has years and years of training and self-defense. Maybe they're a Navy SEAL or something. So they have drilled like how to defend against a knife attack, as well as a bunch of other things. And so they've got that installed in their body. They have done enough drills that they've worked through a ton of fear. And so when this incident happens, like, yeah, there's still risk involved, but it's like, this is not going to be, they're not going to feel unsafe. They're going to be like, okay, somebody's trying to threaten me, right? Like, so it's not that they're oblivious to like, oh, somebody has a knife. That is a threat. I need to take that seriously, right? But they have the logistical skills that they've installed in their body through lots and lots of practice. But even more importantly, they have the emotional skills of they have confronted whatever fears they might have about these kinds of dangerous situations. They have confronted those fears and they've worked through them and worked through them and worked through them. Ideally, certainly you can imagine there can be, scenarios where somebody is doing this in a disassociative way. So that's not what I'm trying to make a case for here, right? I'm trying to make a case for actually facing the fear such that I can be with the scary thing and it's not scary anymore. So if you've been following me for a while, you've heard in some of my other videos where I talk about my relationship with horses. This is part of why I reapproached horseback riding, because horses have scared me my whole life, even though I've also been really drawn to them. So I had briefly tried to horseback ride as a little kid, never felt any sense of competence or agency, and never got over my initial fears. And then on top of that, I was thrown off like onto my head in a really rather scary encounter. And so as an adult, I eventually reapproached horses because I wanted to work on kind of several things, but one of which is I wanted to address this fear. I wanted to work through my fear of horses, my fear of their strength, their energy, their ability to be really big, right? Physically and sort of energetically. And I wanted to work through my fear of my own bigness, because to work with horses, I have to get comfortable with getting big myself and taking up space, not in an abusive way or an ugly way, but just in I am the lead horse. Like I have to enter into the herd and be able to show up in a way that lets the horse know they can trust me and they can follow me, that I actually am going to take responsibility for them and for what we're doing. And so, but to be able to do that, I've had to get comfortable with my own energies. And that's also required me getting comfortable with and working through places of pain where people have misused big energy in my past, where people have misused, anger energy or, aggressive energies and those kinds of things, sort of poor leadership, right? So in my repeatedly practicing working with horses, I can do things that once upon a time were really scary and that do have a degree of danger to them. And yet my body and my emotions are no longer scared. And so that is me taking responsibility for my sense of safety, right? Now, this is where language is tricky, right? Is that like, okay, so if I'm doing a jump, with a horse, right, there is some danger there, right? There is, like, in one sense, like I am less safe doing that than just standing on the ground. But my felt sense of safety, like if I'm doing a good job of metabolizing, the scariness, my felt sense of safety can be pretty similar or maybe even identical. And so again, coming back to this hypothetical scenario, two different people experience, the exact same event, we'll just, in this hypothetical thing, it's the exact same perpetrator, bringing the same intensity, the same, level of skill at threatening someone with a knife, and trying to rob them. One individual has years of training in confronting their fears of this kind of thing and building skills of how do I protect myself, and the other individual does not. And so these two people are going to have very different senses of whether they feel safe or not. And here's the thing. The felt sense of safety isn't ultimately even about how it goes. Say the person who has lots of training, say they still get stabbed, right? Like, okay, that's physically painful, and that, now the risk of life-threatening risk goes up. But even their emotional ability to stay calm, to whatever degree they have that, is going to be very significant. Like the more they can stay calm, they're going to be able to think more clearly. Okay, what do I do for my wound? How do I try to get help? All of these kinds of things. So again, this is tricky because it's like there are these external events, right? There's other people's behavior, and that is a real thing, and we always still have to contend with that. What I'm trying to draw our attention to is that we have a lot more control and ultimately, I would say, responsibility over how we feel emotionally than we tend to talk about or think as a culture. We tend to want to place all of that responsibility or 99% of it onto another person. Again, this shows up especially in romantic relationships, whether dating or in marriage. People will talk about, well, you make me feel unloved, or you make me feel unsafe, or you make me feel feel not respected, or you make me feel unimportant. And they are trying to get at something important there. So it's like that can be an okay starting point, but we need to not let the conversation end there. And in fact, my wish would be for all of us that we say that inside of us of like, oh, they're making me feel unsafe. And then we ask the question, okay, well, what specifically are they doing or not doing that brings up in me feelings of unsafety? And so that's what that's going to lead us to is these two categories, right? Is on the one hand, what in my history is getting evoked by this, and I need to face that and be with that. What places of past pain have I not sufficiently been with such that it reawakens in this moment when my partner raises their voice, when they're getting angry about, somebody who cut them off in traffic, and then suddenly I feel unsafe. Or they're frustrated with me because I was late, and then I'm like, ooh, I feel like they're about to leave me. They're about to abandon me, and so I feel unsafe in that kind of way. It's like, okay, what's in my history that this is hitting? Because that's my responsibility. Nobody can solve that for me. People can help me be with that, right? Which is what a good counselor or mentor or even a friend or family member potentially can do. People can be alongside us, and certainly people training like counselors, mentors, spiritual directors can can help guide us in working with and walking with those difficult emotions. But no one else can fix that for me, right? Like, because here's the thing: even if like I can kind of coerce the other person into like not raising their voice, like it sorry, I'm random notification here. Even if I can coerce them into not raising their voice, I haven't solved my original pain. Like I've kind of just abandoned it. Like, and so here's the cost of that is that if I continue to view the solution to my feeling unsafe, my feeling disrespected, my feeling unloved, if I view the solution to that as lying solely with somebody outside of me, I will like perpetually feel those feelings. I will repeatedly feel unloved, unsafe, disrespected, not pretty. I'll feel ugly, feel stupid, whatever the thing is, whatever the pejorative is, whatever the way is of not feeling enough. Because other people can't fix that. Other people can't fix my sense of shame, my sense of woundedness, my places where I carry fear. Like I have to learn how to be with that. And I do need people who can help me learn how to do that. And I need wise counselors, spiritual directors, etc. But I have to do it. Like if I can't show up and be with those scary places inside of me, like then those places are going to continue to feel scared or feel hurt, feel ashamed, feel not good enough. And those places will perpetually look for opportunities to get triggered, to come up, and then I'll blame the person next to me and say, you're making me feel blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, actually, my history, my wounded history is saying, Sean, pay the fuck attention to us. Like, how long are you going to leave us hurting here in the past? Please turn towards us and help us. Help us heal. Like, we need your help. We need your help. And so if we just blame the other person without addressing our responsibility to ourselves, we perpetuate a continual abandonment, a self-abandonment, abandonment of ourselves. So the second category, which I've already touched on some, is if I don't get clarity on what's actually my original pain and start dealing with that, I'm going to lack the clarity of being able to get specific about things that I do need to address with my partner, my friend, my coworker, my family member, right? Like, because it requires, I have to be able to turn towards my pain a bit in order to then be able to look at the present situation and be like, oh, it's when, my partner, my friend, whoever, when they do X, Y, Z, when they do that kind of behavior or that bring that kind of energy, that evokes this history in me. And so then I can talk to them about like, hey, I need to let you know when you behave in those ways, it's touching some really sensitive places in me. If it would be great if you could, we could talk about maybe you doing that a bit differently, sometimes, depending on what the thing is. Because here's the thing, there can be things where the other person actually isn't even doing anything wrong. This is really nuanced. So I'm like speaking broad brush here, but there can be categories of somebody raising their voice that isn't being dangerous, isn't being abusive, isn't being ugly. They're just bringing some big energy into the room. There can be healthy ways of doing that. That can still feel unsafe to me because of the pain I haven't dealt with. Now, there's also unhealthy ways of bringing big energy to the room. And frankly, that is what's way more freaking common. So, if you're listening to this and you're looking for an excuse to be like, oh, well, Sean says I can bring big energy and I can yell all I want. I'm like, okay, you're missing the point. I want to name that it is possible, and it should be the aspiration of all of us to learn how to be with big energy in a way that is constructive and is healthy and is not attacking or damaging. And I want us to have the category of, just because I am having difficult feelings doesn't mean the other person is doing something wrong. They may be, right? And even if they're not doing anything wrong, I can still have a conversation of like, here's what I would prefer. Here's what would really help me. I need you to at least care about the struggle I'm having, even though this struggle is not your responsibility. And then there are things, okay, right, that are much more clearly, much more overtly, like unambiguous, right? It's like, hey, when you threw that coffee cup, at my head, that was fucking not okay. Like that. I'm trying to think what language always. It's so easy to just be like, that made me feel unsafe, but but that made me feel like you're trying to do, it certainly seemed to me like you're trying to do harm to me, like that. I'm not wanting to be in your presence when you do that, right? That shit's not okay. I really need an apology. I want to understand what the hell's going on with you there. Why did you think that was all right? And yeah, I need you to understand, like, that's like, I don't want things flying at my face. Like, what the hell? Like, no, we're not going to do that. So you can hear here, right? Like both the ways in which we don't have well-developed language, even like it's very clunky. Because we as a culture have just shortened this down to, I had a feeling and it's your fault that I had the feeling. And what I want to invite us to do is to get clunky with this and really try to parse out what are the physical and emotional behaviors and energetic behaviors in the other person that I would like to talk to them about. But to be able to do that, to be able to get that specific and that nuanced, I have to get more clarity on what's my shit. What's my wounding that is coming up here in the context of those particular behaviors, energies, etc. And I've got to be able to hold loosely that I don't know exactly where the line is on sort of like what's sort of right or wrong here. There are lines about right and wrong, but there can be some gray in some of these places where it's like, to use the coffee cup example, this is getting really almost, silly and ridiculous. This would be the very odd exception, right? Is that we find out, like, when we come into the room and they throw a coffee cup at our face and we're like, what the hell? And they're like, I'm so sorry. I was like, I'm flailing. There's a hornet in here. And and it totally slipped out of my hand. Well, that would be a very different scenario. Okay. You're not trying to hurt me. Like you're triggered and freaking out because you've got a fear of hornets, which is, I totally get, because hornets, seem really mean to me. They're not my friend. So, but that's the exception, right? Like that would be the odd exception to that, kind of sort of now sort of a bit of a silly example. So, but my point is, if we want to live well, we need to let go of what I would call this fantasy that people can make us feel things. People can behave in certain ways. They can bring certain kinds of energies that are going to evoke in us certain kinds of feelings. But the fact that those feelings are coming up, those are ultimately our responsibility. I don't mean that to say that I can just like make the feeling go away. I mean that they're my burden and my gift. And it's really both, right? Like, it's a burden in that feelings are hard to work with. They take a lot of energy. They can be really disruptive, incredibly inconvenient. And they are my gift, including the painful feelings. They are my gift because they're for a number of reasons. One, they're inviting me towards healing. They're waving at me saying, hey, we need help, Sean. There's places inside of us that need help. There's places that are still wounded. that are carrying pain from the past, that is getting re-evoked, it's getting echoed into the moment by something that's happening right now that may or may not even be problematic, right? The person, in the room with me may not be behaving inappropriately, but something about their manner is scaring me, is bringing up feelings of fear, bringing up feelings of I'm not loved, I'm not enough, I feel criticized, I feel unimportant, I feel stupid, I feel small. And so the gift here is I get a chance to heal. I get another opportunity to work with pain that might be from 20, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, we have, all sorts of movies about time travel, right? In our culture, which I love. I love time travel movies. I think they're very fascinating and very, very an interesting premise. But this is a way in which we can time travel. And so we have to become skillful time travelers, right? So we're not skillful time travelers when we don't deal with our shit, because we get sucked into the past without realizing it. We feel the experience of the past in the present, not realizing how much of it's the past. And then we blame people around us and we keep ourselves stuck in the past. Skillful time travelers learn to recognize, some of this is history. And it's my responsibility, it's my burden and my gift, my burden and my opportunity to try to get to heal this. I actually get another chance, even though this happened 30 years ago. It's not done. The story's not over because it keeps coming up. And so I can be with it in a different way. I cannot change the original event, but I can change my experience of it. I can change how my body and my heart, my mind, my soul, how I'm able to be with the historical pain of that. And if I do that work enough, if I build the muscles and I get help, right, with being with these scary emotions, they become less scary. So I can do things with horses now that oh my gosh. I mean, when I started working with horses again as an adult, it was just coming up around the horse, please don't kill me, Mr. Horse. I don't know about this. It was really, I was just nervous being next to them. And now, I come up, I greet them. I'm this is part of how I work, is I form some connection with them. And then, I'm lifting up their hooves. And even then when they're I'm tired of holding my foot up, it's no, we're not done. I'm still cleaning out this hoof. And I can be firm about that, not in a mean way, but just in a no, I am in charge, and this is how we're doing things. And just all these kinds of things. That's, again, it's not about being mean or bossing the horse around. It's about learning to be a horse to this horse, learning to take up the kind of space that a fellow horse would take up, and be okay, now I'm taking the position of lead horse right now. And so we are going to do some work together. We're going to work on some things. We're going to ride. We're going to do some groundwork or whatever it may be. And it's not that I don't still get scared sometimes. I had what I like to call an unplanned dismount, a month or two ago, which was scary, and also not. It was both. That was what was fascinating, is that because I've practiced falling enough that it wasn't traumatizing. It was kind of oh, this sucks. This is unpleasant. I took the fall really well. I got back into the saddle right away. And I was gentle with myself. I was mindful of my body has had a shock, right? And then it was several weeks of doing certain things on horseback that I was having to work with my body to remetabolize. We are okay. Because my body was oh, are we about to come out of the saddle? Are we about to involuntarily dismount? And being no, body, we're okay. We're okay. It's fine. And the fall actually was fine. I took it just perfectly, and no permanent damage of any kind, protected everything that I needed to protect, and was was pain-free in a week. It was fantastic. Best fall ever. But it's still, there's this okay, helping a part of me work through it really is okay. So it's not that we don't get scared again. It's not that we don't have new experiences that put some some fear, some pain, some hurt, some sadness, some longing, some whatever inside of us. But again, the invitation is, let's keep being with it. And then in places where in relationships, we have the capacity then to get very specific and very nuanced. And to do that in a way that holds lots of space, lots of grace for the humanity of our fellow human, right? So we're not coming in with a bunch of judgment of like, you're an unsafe person. It's like, well, they may not that they might be behaving in ways that are not conducive to close relationship, right? And that I want to find language ways that isn't just doing our classic like you make it feel unsafe. You can feel here like this is where we're as a culture so unpracticed at this. So it's like, but yeah, like somebody they may have patterns of like, like, hey, you're always shouting. To me, it feels like shouting. And that doesn't make me want to draw close to you. Right. Like if this is just you being passionate, I need to understand that better, and I can try to translate some, but still, I just need you to know, like, that's going to be, it may always be a bit challenging for me. And so, you can decide what you want to do with that. If that's not coming from an unhealthy place, like all that volume and intensity, like that's fine, but it's just, that's going to be hard for me to work with. And I would love for you to examine, like, whether it's coming from some wounding, whether are you a bit triggered, like what, what's the deal with that, right? So it's like, again, I want us to have more nuance here because it's for our healing and the sake of the healing of others, right? Like when we just reduce this to you make me feel, we rob ourselves of opportunities for healing, and we rob other people of opportunities for healing, right? When we just blame others for, hey, you're responsible for how I feel. Number one, they can't ever fucking solve that, right? So that's an impossible burden to place on somebody. And we have taught them nothing that might actually be useful in their own development, right? When I can get specific and nuanced about like, hey, that tone of voice, or when you roll your eyes at that moment, or, when you slam the door, right? Like that gives them specific concrete things to wonder about. And when I can do that from a place of not judging, but still being firm of like, hey, I'm really not okay with that. When you do that, if you slam books down on the table, I'm going to say, hey, remember we talked about this, and I'm going to get up and leave because I'm not, that's something I'm not willing to tolerate. But that gives that's so much more redemptive, right? Like this is creating the opportunity for the other person to take responsibility for their shit, right? Like this is the goal, that we would all own what is our own stuff, not own anything that's anyone else's, right? Because we can't do anything about that. And in the process of that, actually be able to offer more precise, more nuanced, more direct, more courageous feedback to one another. I mean, I need this in my own life. I need friends who can say to me, hey, when you did that, it did not land well with me, right? Like I need people to give me that feedback. I mean, when I work with clients, like I'm always checking in, not out of an anxious place, but out of a, I'm a fellow human. I'm going to miss things. Like I'm checking in of how did that land when I said that, when I did that several minutes ago, like how did that land in your system? Like, is it, did that feel good? Did that feel bad? Like, what did that evoke in you? Like, and I'm doing that for multiple reasons. I want to know if I've missed something, right? So that we can repair, but I'm also trying to help the person know themselves, right? Like, how are they experiencing me? How do they experience a fellow human, right? Like I'm trying to train them in this very process that we're talking about here, right? So, because I really believe that if we can let go of of the fantasy that some other person is going to solve our life for us, is going to rescue us from the burden and the beauty of our life. If we can little by little let go of that fantasy and little by little move towards like actually, being with our pain, being with the hurting parts of us and helping them heal. And then in turn, get specific with people around us about, what feels good and what doesn't feel good. That the more that we can do that, I think there's just so much more life. There's more agency. There's more peace. There's more joy. There's more capacity for play, right? Because it's like, I have to have an internal sense of safety. I have to have an internal sense of trust. And that reminds me, that's another common phrase, right? We'll say, I just can't trust this person. Which partly is about their behaviors, but it's also partly about, I can't trust that I can be with the painfulness that will come up if they fail me again, right? So it's, again, all the same thing. So it's like there's this, I want to invite us into a deeper sense of real peace, of real joy, of real play. And that I think can only come through kind of this taking responsibility and letting go of the fantasy of, well, you have to make me feel better or you make me feel bad. To instead be able to say, hey, when you do X, Y, Z, it brings up these feelings in me, and makes me, and then I, in turn, don't want to spend time with you, or I feel angry at you, or I feel confused, or, whatever that may be. So I hope you've been able to stick with me on this. I hope you've been able to feel sort of the nuances here. I'm not trying to in any way defend bad behavior, or make excuses for bad behavior. When people are doing abusive things, that is not okay. When people are threatening us in various ways, that's not okay. And I'm wanting us to grapple with that there is a range of ways of being and behaviors where they may or may not be doing anything wrong. Like, it may just be hitting places of sensitivity in us. And we need to negotiate the relational dynamics, right? Of like, this is where I'm at in my journey, and so it's going to be hard for me to be in your presence when you bring that kind of energy. But we have to take responsibility of, I'm still responsible for trying to build the capacity to be able to handle more. Not as in a suck it up kind of way, but because I want to help my insides heal. Like, just like I want to be able to handle more, to use that phrase, on horseback, like I want to be able to do more things and be around horses and be in proximity to them and not be afraid. Have my system be like, I'm so glad to be here, right? That's what I mean by handle more. I don't mean suck it up. I don't mean just like, all right, I need to just be able to like, put up with, potentially jerky behavior or something. It's like, that's not what I'm saying. This is about building resiliency, building my capacity to be present to lots of different experiences and be like, I'm all right. To have, as I referenced in another video, from a while ago, like, have somebody run me off the road, which was legit dangerous. Like, there's a lot of ways that could have gone bad and could have resulted in my death, somebody else's death. So, there was real danger there. And I would say emotionally never felt unsafe. Like, I was like really grounded, and I handled it really well, like navigation wise with the steering wheel, and I handled the subsequent fallout really well. I kept my footing emotionally, and so it was inconvenient. It was a little annoying. Like, it was not what I had planned for, like heading out of town on vacation, which is what I was trying to do, and blowing out a tire and like, all there's all these kinds of things. But it was actually really okay. Like, not in some kind of mind trick kind of way, but because I had expanded my capacity emotionally to be with these kinds of experiences and be okay. And so I was able to like brainstorm and problem solve, and, again, it wasn't like a perfect day. It was, kind of shitty logistically, but emotionally it was really a win. Like, I was really okay, and I was even laughing at points at some of the ridiculousness of how many things went wrong subsequently, and so that's the goal for us, right? Like, that's just a way better life. Like, I don't want to go back to how, where I would have been years ago with something like this, where I would have been traumatized. I would have been like having so much shame come up of like, what does this mean about me? God doesn't care about me. I would have been feeling scared of like, oh, this is all these things are going to go wrong now, and I'm not going to make it on vacation, just like spinning out and losing my shit, right? Like, man, I mean, it's so much energy wasted, so much lost there. Like, and, like, you could not pay me to go back to that. Like, so like, yeah, so this is the invitation for all of us. This is the invitation for you. That if you persist in doing this kind of difficult work, if you find somebody to help you do this kind of work, that you can have even something logistically dangerous, right? Like getting run off the road happen, and actually be able to be pretty calm inside and like navigate well, steer well, be as logistically safe as you can be, and then make it through, through all the complications of, all the things that followed and whatnot. And so I want that for you. I want all the parts of you, all the parts of each of us to get healing and to not be stuck, to not be reliving the same original wound over and over, but just sort of covered over in whatever the present circumstance is. And I want you to be able to have the ability to, in a meaningful, specific way, have difficult conversations with the people in your life about like, hey, when you do XYZ, when you're late for our meeting, this is what it makes me wonder. This is what what I feel inside. And I don't know what you're intending. I don't know what's happening with you there, but we need to talk about this because this is important to me. Right? Like that's so much more useful. That's so much more potentially redemptive for both parties than just, hey, you make me feel important. What the hell? Did I say important? Unimportant. Anyways, you know what I mean. Well, until next time, peace be with you.